one thing I think that makes it different or easier for us, whether we're lying in green meadows or walking in the darkest of valleys, is we, as children of God, have a Father in heaven. Not everyone else has that. Other people face really difficult times and they draw on their own strength. But God has given himself to us in that beautiful relationship of Father, which speaks of safety, security, identity, and purpose. And when we walk on that journey, we have this hope. We have this hope in Isaiah that says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not be faint." So even if our pathways are green meadows, or even if our pathways are the darkest of valleys, this is still true. We have hope in the Lord. In Psalm 18, it talks a lot about God as a father, and it tells us that his ways are perfect, that we can trust him. It tells us that his word is flawless, perfect, absolutely trustworthy. And it tells us that he shields and protects all of us who choose to put ourselves under his protection. So we have protection, we have strength, we have safety, and we have a God who is perfect in every way. So our paths, our journeys, are headed up by someone that is abundantly trustworthy, abundantly faithful, and promises to protect and fight for us. He is, simply put, the perfect Father. So we're going to look again at the concept of a father and how God gently leads us on. But he does a couple of things. He doesn't just throw us into situations. Sometimes it might feel like he's thrown us into a situation, but the truth is he has never, ever, ever done that. And there are some kind of steps in his processing before he releases us into new stages of our lives. The first one is that he waits until we are old enough. Whatever the next stage is, he waits until we're old enough. Now, for some of some of us, it might be a physical age. So we might need to be old enough to go on a ride at the amusement park, or we might be old enough to go on, go to university or something. But for us as Christians, we also have that concept that we need to be old enough spiritually. And we have a lot of Christians that sit in churches and are still baby Christians. We have a lot of people who have chosen not to continue to walk forward with God. They've chosen to stay as baby Christians, kind of in this innocent, excuse that I don't have to try too hard. So God will wait for us. He won't force us to grow up. He will never force us to grow up. He will wait patiently for us. It's like if you think about this kid with his bike. The kid has the bike. The child has the bike, but he doesn't want to use it yet, or he's not able to use it yet. And so the bike just stays in the shed. As Christians, we can have our salvation, but we can leave it in the shed. We can choose not to walk. We can choose not to discover what it looks like to ride it, not to discover what it looks like as we move forward and journey with it. We can leave the bike completely in the shed. So God will wait for us. He will never force us. Some of you might feel like you've been forced. I don't know, sometimes you might feel like God has pushed you into a situation that you have no interest at all in being in, but God knows. He's waited until you are old enough to move forward. The next thing he does is he makes sure that we're equipped properly. Now in this picture, the little kid has a helmet on. And I think God does that for us too. He waits until we've got our equipment, our protective equipment in place. He gives us our helmet, he gives us our shield, he gives us our shoes and our belt. We all know those pieces of armor that he gives us, but he waits until we're properly equipped. He waits until we're able to move forward into a situation before launching us on that next situation. Maybe some of our equipment might be a Band-Aid if you're riding a bike, because sometimes we fall off. Does anyone ever make a mistake and fall off? Okay, so sometimes we need Band-Aids. The equipment might be a Band-Aid. But he waits until we're ready. He waits until we know how to use the equipment that he's given us. And then we move forward. Then he takes us to a safe place. Here, the Father has taken his Son to a quiet road that is flat and protected. He doesn't put him at the top of a mountain and go, okay, off you go. He doesn't leave him in the middle of the ocean where the bike wouldn't work. He takes him to a safe place, pulls him aside, doesn't release him onto the M25. He holds him back and lets him gradually learn how to ride. God does that for us too. I like to think Pierpont's a safe place for all of us. He brings us aside and he goes, right, I'm going to teach you some stuff here. And all of you have been pulled aside for this time, whether you're on stage 2 or on stage 4. He pulls us aside to quiet, safe places and teaches us things, speaks into us, gets us ready that we can slowly and gradually move forward. And then he teaches us about what lies ahead and what we're going to need to do. Now, this last part is different for all of us. Every one of us have different callings and purposes. We have different gifts, and we're going to interact in the world in different ways. But he knows exactly what to do to teach us how to get on our bike, whatever that bike is. And then he releases us. Finally, he takes his hands off, he stands back, and he watches us with great joy as we set off and go and have an adventure. We don't have him running along behind holding the bike anymore. He puts the training wheels on and off we go. And we have a really good time. That's what happens in stage 3 and 4. You get your training wheels. And they've got their training wheels, it's true. They were released, they had to go, they went out, they were ministering, they were teaching. And that's what happens to us too. God equips us, he prepares us, he teaches us, and then he goes, okay, I'm going to take my hands off, and you guys are going to have a go by yourself now. And he stands back and watches as we have a go, which is pretty exciting. He does that for us all the time, not just on nets, through our lives. He puts us in a place, he prepares us, he equips us, he gives us a chance to be ready for it, and then he goes, right, now we're going to have a go. And he releases us. And we see this pattern time and time again in the Bible. So many characters of God did not just wake up one day and discover that they were leading the people of Israel. They went through big trials, big tribulations, times in the wilderness. So many of them did. Abraham, Joseph, Moses, David, Peter, the list honestly goes on and on. He does this regularly, and he'll do this with each of us. For the old enough example, Abraham was how old before he became a father to the nation? 100 years old. It took 100 years before Abraham was ready. He didn't even know how old Moses was before he got, released to do his thing with the Exodus. 80. He was 80. Okay, so a lot of us still have a lot of waiting time. But he does. He prepares us. He takes us aside. Some other people up here are closer. No, joking. I'm joking. Okay. But he does. He puts us aside and leaves us somewhere safe that we can spend time learning the things that we need to learn. He equips us properly. David, right from the very beginning of his life, and we're actually quite privileged to know a number of different things that happened to him before he became the king of Israel. He did many things. He spent time shepherding, and he saw that God would use things that seemed meaningless to the rest of the world to equip him for his next step, which was to go and fight Goliath. And he sees God as faithful. And then he, gets a position in Saul's court where he's playing music for him to calm him down, and he learns about worship and what that looks like. And then we see later on he has a big army of his mighty men, and he learns to lead and to fight and to take ground, all before he ever became king, all before he ever stepped into what God was calling him to do. And that's an amazing story in itself. But God equips us through the little things, through the meaningless things, through the things that we don't understand. I would hope by now that you've probably realised that every single day God is trying to teach us things. He's trying to show us things about who we are. He's trying to explain who he is and how the two of them work together. And our temptation might be to throw away the things that look not religious enough or not LL enough, and to dismiss the things that don't fit into our nice box. But the truth is, he wants to teach us every moment of every day through Ray. Through other people. Yeah, he does. He wants to teach us every single day, every single moment. But if we stand there and we say, no, this isn't something that is going to be a blessing to me or a benefit to me, then we miss out. And that's true, we do. We go through a difficult situation with a friend and we think, oh, that's so annoying, I just want to get back to my God stuff. God was there trying to teach you things. You struggle through a situation that is so difficult at work and you think, oh, if I could just get to church or to my Bible study group, that'll be amazing. I'll just feel the peace of God again. God was trying to teach you something through that difficult time. He's always trying to equip us, always trying to prepare us, because he and he alone knows what's ahead of you. Nobody else does. Doesn't matter how good your planning is, God knows what's ahead, no one else. And I would encourage all of us never to dismiss one single moment of one single day and think, oh, God's not going to use that. He will if we let him. He will. Then he takes us to a safe place. He sets us aside. Who knows how long Joseph was in prison for? 17 years? 13 years. From the age of 17. 17 years before he ruled for how long? 80 years he ruled. But he was in this cell for 13 years. Moses spent 40 years in the desert shepherding people before he got called anywhere. God takes us to safe places and he teaches us things. He shows us things about himself. And then he releases us for the journey ahead. I want to look a little bit more today at Joshua, who I think is an amazing character. The first time we see him, we recognize that he has fled with all the Israelites from Egypt. As far as I could work out, the likelihood was that he was probably around his 30s when he left. And so he flees from Egypt into the wilderness. He would have seen the amazing miracles that God did. So that already would be hugely impacting. Can you imagine if you saw those plagues? They would just blow your mind, I think. So already, this was a man who had seen God at work. Then he flees into the wilderness. And quite early on, we see that he's actually fighting the Amalekites. And actually he says, that Joshua was the one that won the victory. We do know that Abraham was up there like this with his hands being supported. And every time their hands fell, they kind of took a step backwards. But Joshua was the one who was physically up the front fighting. He was physically up the front doing the work, and he's actually named specifically. So the first time we see him, he's a mighty man. The first time we see him, he's a mighty man and he's fighting. And then he goes up the mountain with Moses. Now we start to see him being coupled with Moses quite regularly. Did I say Abraham before? I meant Moses. It's so weird how your brain does that. Okay, Moses. Anyway, then we see him going up the mountain with Moses, and all of a sudden he's coupled regularly with Moses. It's Moses and Joshua. And he goes up the mountain and he's there on the mountain, up the mountain when God gives Moses the law, the commandments. That's a pretty big privilege. That would be pretty amazing. He stays up there for 40 days because Moses disappears for 40 days to get those actual commandments. So he's doing some amazing things. Already we must be thinking, maybe God's got something big for this guy. He might be sitting up there going, Moses, can you come back? I'm up here by myself. There's no food. This is boring. It's been 40 days now. He might be despising what God is doing. But I can tell you, God wasn't wasting his time. God was doing something very intentional and very purposeful. The next time we hear about him, he's being sent into Canaan to be a spy. And he goes in and he is so excited by what he sees. He is pumped up. He is ready for the Israelites to go and assume their position in the land of Canaan, to take what God has given them as inheritance. Do you know how long it was since they'd left Egypt at that point? 2 years. So they'd been walking in the desert for 2 years. He was ready. He'd seen his God do amazing things, bring the plagues down. He'd fought some battles. He'd gone up and had a moment with God. And now he wanted to walk into this land. 2 years is a long journey. You guys have only been here for 6 months, 1 year. Imagine doing 2 years. Crazy. So he was ready. He wanted to go into the promised land. He trusted God. He remembered what God had done in Egypt and knew that God was faithful and powerful and would fulfill his promises. But everyone else freaked out. So they walked around the desert for another 38 years. So next time we see Joshua. I'm going to read something about their response. So in Numbers 14, this is Joshua and Caleb. And basically they come back and they're trying to work out what they're going to do. Whether they're going to go into the land now. And everyone says, no, it's horrible. We can't go in there. Egypt's way better. Let's go back to Egypt if at all possible. And Joshua and Caleb are really upset. In Numbers 14, 6-10, it says, they were among those who had explored the land, and they were upset and they tore their clothes. And they said to the entire Israelite assembly, now remember that would have been well over 1 million people. They stood up in front of 1 million people and said this to the people. They said, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because he will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. So they were passionate, they were excited, they were talking to 1 million people. You can imagine, I don't know if you can, imagine standing up in front of 1 million people and telling them how amazing God is, how trustworthy he is, how amazing that land that he has given us is. It's not a terrible desert inheritance. This is a land flowing with milk and honey, guys, come on. And they're like, nah, we're going to kill you. Makes no sense, but this is Joshua. So Joshua's got a lot of prep time. He's still nobody, still not doing anything. And he kept on going. He spent so much time with Moses. He sees faithfulness in his God. We hear at one time that Moses and him are in the tabernacle with God, and Moses leaves and Joshua stays behind because he wants to be with God for longer. This is a man who was, using this time when he didn't have a particular position yet. He was learning about faithfulness. He was learning about the trustworthiness of God. He was allowing God to shape him and to give him experiences. He was going on this journey. And then finally, towards the end of Deuteronomy, we start to see now he's going to walk into the position that God has called him. He's now going to be the next leader of the Israelite people. We know that Moses did something in the wilderness that stopped him from being able to go forward. And Joshua was the one who was told that he would move forward instead. So I want to read to you from Deuteronomy chapter 31. And it says this: Then Moses went out and spoke these words to all of Israel. I am now 120 years old, and I am no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross ahead of you, and he will destroy the nations before you, and you will take possession of the land. Joshua will also cross over ahead of you, as the Lord said. And the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, whom he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all his people. So he gets Joshua to come up on the stage with him in front of the 1 million+ people. And he says to Joshua, be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them. You must divide it among them as their inheritance. So it's a pretty big task, 1 million people needing some inheritance. And the Lord himself goes before you, and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. So here we see, be strong and courageous. And it gets repeated numerous times in this passage and then the next, which we'll look at as well. First one is in Deuteronomy 31, verse 6. And he says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified of them, for the Lord your God goes with you and he will never leave you. Who was them? Them was the people that 38 years before they'd been freaked out by. So the first time we hear God say, be strong and courageous, he's addressing something that happened 38 years ago, something that for 38 years had become this huge, massive, overwhelming fear in their life. Some of us have those things in our lives. Maybe we haven't dealt with them for 38 years or less. But we have them. We have things in our life that have been there undealt with. God says, be strong and courageous. He addresses what needs to be addressed and he encourages us to move forward. And he says that to everybody. Then the next time we see strong and courageous is in the next verse. And this time he says, be strong and courageous. Now he's talking to Joshua. For you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to give to their ancestors. Now this time, Moses is affirming Joshua in front of the entire assembly. So not only does he tell the people to be strong and courageous, now he's saying to the next leader, you have to be strong and courageous. Everybody, he's going to be strong and courageous, and he's going to lead you. Now around this time, God has also told them that the Israelites are going to do a terrible job once they enter the promised land. They're going to make a big mess of it and it's all going to fall apart. But he still gets Joshua to come up in front of the crowd and he goes, okay, you are going to lead these people. They're going to make a mess. He doesn't tell them, everyone, they're going to make a mess. They're going to make a mess, but I want you to lead them. I want you to be strong and courageous. And all of those people, those millions of people, see that and hear that and acknowledge Joshua. And then later in verse 23 again, we see the Lord gave this command to Joshua, son of Nun, be strong and courageous, for you will bring the Israelites out of the land I promised them on an oath, and I will be with you. And so God basically, again, calls Joshua aside and he says, this is what you need to do. You need to be strong and courageous. You will do what I have promised. Now we have Moses dying. This is on just days before he dies. And then Moses dies and we go to the next book, which is Joshua. And here's probably where you're very familiar with the passages of strong and courageous. But now we have it again 3 times. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. The first time God, again, is talking to Joshua. Then they're talking to the people. And then the last one is actually the people saying, Joshua, be strong and courageous. So they're now telling him to be strong and courageous. And when I was doing research for this topic, because I've prepared a long time in advance, what I worked out that strong and courageous was actually basically a war cry, like an ancient Hebrew war cry. It's kind of what they would say when they were kind of, girding their loins and going to go into battle, going to go into a new season. They would like kind of encourage each other with be strong and courageous. I'd say it in Hebrew, but I can't. But be strong and courageous. That's what they would say to one another, like an encouragement. And I thought, these words are great. So we're going to have a look at them just quickly, what these words are. The word strong is hazak. And it means to strengthen, so proud of myself then, to strengthen, prevail, harden, be strong, become strong, be courageous, be firm, grow firm, and be resolute. Basically, it talks about strength within. And the letters that are used to make up this word in the Hebrew speak about a binding that has to happen, a binding that needs to occur. And that binding occurs between us and God. So there's a binding that must happen. And another one of the letters in there implies that we can't move forward without him. It's not like we just get his strength and go, awesome God, I'll be off. It's like we kind of bind with him, get his strength, and then go with him. So this word talks about not being strong in our own strength or our own abilities or anything like that. It talks about binding ourselves to God and moving forward with him. And the last part, it actually talks about kind of a purifying concept. So in that process of binding ourselves to God, choosing to walk forward with him, we are being purified. So that word strong has a lot of connotation within it. It's not like, yes, I'm really strong. It's actually talking about not your strength at all. It's talking about the strength that comes when we connect with God. So be bold and courageous is really, connect with God, use his strength, walk with him, allow him to purify you, and courageous, which is like much cooler. Okay, the next word is courageous, and it is ametz. It's tricky. And it means to be strong, brave, bold, alert, courageous, solid, and hard. And the Hebrew letters in this one talk about, have a concept of humbling yourself and allowing God to come and to be God and you to be his child as opposed to you to be the boss of everything. So there's a humbling position there. So again, we've bound ourselves, we've chosen to walk forward, there's a purifying process going on, and really it's less of us and more of God. So every time they called out, be strong and courageous, they weren't saying, Joshua, you go and fight that battle for us, you're amazing, woo! They weren't saying that at all. They were saying, okay, let's connect with God, let's bind with him, let's walk forward, let's allow him to purify us with his word, let's take the humble position, because in that space, then we'll be victorious. And that's a truth for all of us. We're all moving forward on journeys. Every one of us is on a journey. Maybe we're in the middle of one, maybe we're coming to the end of a season, maybe we're about to begin a new season that we have no idea what the details would look like. But regardless, God calls us to be strong and courageous, to bind ourselves with him, to invite him to walk with us, to go on that process of purification, and to be in the humble position. No better way to go and fight a war. Over the last few months especially, I've seen these stage 4 guys do amazing things. They have become stronger day by day. They've become more resolute in their understanding of God. They've chosen him time and time again in the face of difficulties, being uncomfortable, feeling completely unprepared, but yet again choosing day after day to step up and have a go. And God has absolutely come through for them. They have bound themselves. They have chosen to step forward. They have allowed that purifying process, which is so awkward. It is. They've taken the humble position. They've become bold and courageous and strong and all these amazing words. And now God is about to release them into the world on their next journey. At the beginning, we looked at Psalm 18 and we talked about the concepts of fatherhood that are mentioned there. We talked about his ways are perfect, his word is flawless, and he protects and shields us. But that passage goes on and it says, as for God, his way is perfect. Oh no, wait, you've already got that part. It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He causes me to stand on the heights. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. You make your saving help my shield, and your right hand sustains me. Your help has made me great. You provide a broad path for my feet so that my ankles do not give way. And I believe that's true for stage 4, for the guys who are leaving at the end of stage 2, for all of us. That with God, we can walk these paths. The paths will be safe, that we won't stumble with him. We will be secure. We will have strength. We will go places that we never thought were possible. If we do it, bound to God, walking with God, allowing him to purify us each day and take the humble position. The minute any of those fall out of line, everything starts to become about us. And it becomes very difficult for us to walk into the callings and the giftings and the purposes that God has for us because we've inserted ourselves and our own thoughts in there. So, stage 4, you are now ready to take off your training wheels and to ride away into the future. So I just want to read this over you. It's from Ephesians 3, verse 14 to 21. It says, for this reason, I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, from whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what the width and the length and the depth and the height, to know the love of Christ which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be the glory in the church of Jesus Christ to all generations, forever and ever. Amen.